Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me. I'm just to see where this is gonna go
Me too.
after after our private conversation.
Like we better hit record and get to business here, huh? But it's always a joy to talk to you. We've been friends now, I think, a year and a half, and I really respect your opinion and always enjoy our chats, whether they're private or online. So it's great to have you on the show for the very first time. But why don't you introduce yourself to my audience?
I'm sure. My name is Mano Elia. I guess to keep it short, I'm Cradle Orthodox. I was born Greek Orthodox in a traditional Greek home. I kind of veered off into the occult, I would say around 1999, 97, 99, around that time, and found my way back to the faith uh, through providential experiences, being inquisitive, or that kind of thing, I guess. A couple of years ago, I would say now about 3, 4 years ago, I do a podcast and radio show, SOS Radio, and Study of Stuff podcast. I don't know. I guess that's it.
Yeah, a lot of fun stuff. You're like one of the funnest places online for Orthodox people. So yeah, I enjoyed the show. So you usually talk about your coming back to Orthodoxy. You've talked about that quite a bit, but I want to rewind a little bit and maybe go into what your childhood was like, and maybe what are some of the things that you were thinking about. What I don't want to say drove you away, but what allowed you to drift away, we could say. So maybe if you could just start with what was your home life and your, like, in the sense of the church, your church life like as a child.
Okay. My home life and church life are kind of intertwined, so I'll just give a little bit of background on that. My parents are still together. Um, they have probably one of the healthiest relationships I've ever seen between a man and a woman, especially in a modern world. They're both immigrants, came to Canada, late 60s for my dad, early 70s for my mom. My childhood was pretty normal. Two sisters, you know, traditional Greek upbringing, spoke Greek first before I spoke English, that kind of thing. How the faith fit into it all, I would say, you know, especially old school Greeks, you can't be Greek without being Orthodox, is a common thing said. So, but my family wasn't super religious, especially now that I've come back to the faith and I've seen kind of more of a healthy Orthodox life. I would say we were more ethnically Orthodox. We'd go to church for Pascha. Sometimes we would fast. We would go to church here and there. Like, it wasn't like rare to go to church, but it wasn't super common up until about maybe when I got into grade 6, 7, 8. Then we started to go a little bit more regularly. It turns out my parents wanted to expose us to the church after having talked to them recently about this. Some of their interest may have been to kind of harness our Greekness. Some of it was maybe to expose us to the faith. I don't know. I'll leave that to them to kind of describe that. I don't want to put words in their mouth. My grandfather, from my dad's father, um, was definitely a bigger influence than I realized when it comes to Orthodoxy. A lot of the things I did learn, I learned through osmosis or hanging out with my grandfather one particular summer in specific. So to answer your question about the Orthodoxy, it's a combination of like growing up in a traditional healthy family, and then my grandfather's influence. My father's eh, eh, um, my father provided a lot in terms of the history of the church, more from like less from like the church fathers history, but more from like you know teaching me about the Byzantine Empire, Eastern Roman Empire, the influence around the world, as well as far as the Greek influence, all that kind of stuff. I don't know how much detail you want, but does that
No,
kind of
I
answer
thought
your
that was.
question?
I remember it was a while ago. You were telling the story they used to read you bedtime stories or something about
Yes.
Byzantium.
Hmm.
Like most of us would have, like in retrospect, loved that, right? Like we don't. We have to study this as adults. We have no idea. American schools don't really teach about Byzantium. It gets like a paragraph,
Hmm.
maybe. So yeah, I was pretty jealous when I heard that. That must have been really good for your formation, I would think.
For sure. My both my parents are fantastic, and like thinking back to how they are as parents and how they were when I was a child. Definitely blessed. My dad would read us bedtime stories every night, whether it would be like Plato or Aristotle. He kind of catered it to each child. He knew I liked philosophy and history, so for me it was more philosophy and history, which included Eastern Roman Empire. And my mom, actually thinking back, she taught me how to pray. I don't know if she remembers this. I think up until I was in grade 7, I prayed every night. And not anything traditional. Like I would just kind of talk to God. That's how I looked at it. And I would just finish it off with the I don't know how to say it in English. I should. I'm horrible like that. And I would just finish it
Through the
off with
prayers.
it's yeah, it's the to the prayers of the Holy Fathers. I don't know how to say it in English, but I can say it perfectly in Greek. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, through the prayers of our Holy Fathers, Lord
Y-
Jesus
y-
Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us.
Right. Yeah. So I would
Yeah.
end it that
Mhm.
way. So it was a combination of both of them kind of taking me down that route that kind of definitely had an impact for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that you would. I mean, I understand why you would maybe call that um, somewhat nominal or laid back, but from an American point of view, it was like, wow, your parents taught you how to pray. That's amazing. Your parents read you stories from the church and from the Greek people. I think that's so much more than what a lot of Americans get. And I'm going to ask you another question. Might seem odd, but did you eat dinner together every night?
Every night. Every single night we did our cross before we would eat. So yeah, every single night we would all sit at the same table, no TVs, none of that stuff. I always found it weird. I thought it was like a TV thing, like meaning watching it like I would watch these families on TV eating
Mhm.
like, and I didn't think that was a real thing people did because we never did that. We always sat at the table, we all had our positions, everyone sat at the same spot, and we always had dinner together as a family right through high school, right through high school.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I actually have
It
a
is.
whole episode coming out on why that's so important. But obviously, your parents were pouring in a lot of love and
Yes.
spirituality and care for you. So I've heard you say before that you had some really deep questions as a child, like looking in the mirror and wondering what's looking back at you. How old were you when you were having, like, beginning to have these kind of thoughts?
Uh right from the beginning. Um I hesitate because I don't want to make it sound like I'm just, intelligent or special or whatever. Because some people might take it that's what I mean, but I didn't even think it was weird to ask these questions. So I'm being hesitant because I'm trying to not make it sound like. But right from the beginning, as far back as I can remember, I had a lot of weird questions like that. The mirror thing in specific, I have very early childhood memories. Actually, I freaked out my parents recently. Maybe I'm saying this to validate myself that my memory is rather extraordinarily accurate and good. Like I was remembering things that they were like, "You remember that?" I mentioned that only because I remember the actual bathroom in our very first house. So I must have been maybe grade 1, maybe before that, staring in the mirror every single day, in the morning, at night, looking into my pupils and just having this bizarre experience of like, what is going on here? Something's going on here. So that was very early, very very early, grade 1, kindergarten, around there, I would say.
Yeah, I wanted to have this conversation with you because I knew that was one of your experiences, and I think that a lot of people think that children don't have deep thoughts,
Mm.
and I know I did from a young age. And there's several saints we can talk about if you want about Saint Cyril the Athonite had an experience at 4 years old. That kind of burdened him until he was, I think, 19. Saint Paisios, the same thing. And so I think it's really important for parents to understand that your kid is actually thinking really deep things. I don't think
Mm.
it's that unusual. Um, because I asked a couple other people and they all kind of agreed. So I think we make the mistake of giving kids childish things, thinking that they're like not old enough to understand or something. But I think quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. So were you sharing these thoughts with your parents?
um Here and there, at a later stage. So then we're like, I always kind of use the what house we were living in, because we moved a lot in the
Yeah.
beginning. So at the house that they still live in today, so I must have been in grade 4. I remember walking into my father's office and telling him that I felt like I was like a robot. I didn't know how to word it. Like I was like a robot, but the real me is inside my head moving around the body. And I was trying to describe consciousness. Like what is that part of me that's not this part of me? Like this is the what I am. What I was describing was I talk about this a lot. And even before coming back to Orthodoxy, it's actually one of the things that led me to Orthodoxy. The obsession of the who versus the what. Like we're always concentrating on what we are, and we're always focusing on what we are rather than the who we are. So to get back to my original story I was trying to tell, was I walked into my father's office and I was trying to describe the who versus the what, and I didn't know how to describe it. I didn't have the words for it, so I kind of looked at it as like the physical form was a robot that I was moving, but the real me is kind of like in my head, in my heart, kind of moving things. Like what is that thing? So what I was trying to ask was like the essence versus the energy, I guess, if I was going to put it in like Orthodox terms, the who am I moving this robot? So I think that was one of the early times I remember asking him. I would ask him weird questions always. My dad might still remember, agree that I did do that. Um, yeah, I would always ask the essence of why making certain decisions, like why do we have to follow rules? Why do we have to, like, why can't I question things that I'm learning in school? And like, and
Mhm.
not criticizing my dad or other adults, but it was always just kind of like, just kind of, that's how it is. You got to do it. Like, but I was always kind of like that. I'm still like that. If you can't explain something to me, I kind of lose,
Yeah.
not respect for your opinion, but like you're just like, you know what I mean? You're not answering my question. And that always
Mhm.
annoyed me.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point because a lot of kids do have questions and parents are tired or sometimes I know as like a parent of younger kids, younger than you obviously, that sometimes you just need your kid to obey because you're busy and you've got to get, things done. And you're like, just do it. But I think we have to really resist that and really listen to what our kids are asking because it is a window into what they're thinking about.
Yep.
And the church always has an answer for these things, so we shouldn't be scared to try to answer it, answer from the church's point of view on any of these subjects, anything the child brings up.
Yep.
Um,
I agree.
so was the church ever, did you ever ask people in the church or find answers for what you were looking for in the church, or you just came to think that maybe the church doesn't have the answers?
Yeah. I felt that the church didn't have those answers. I started to view Christianity, um, kind of like a childish version of explaining things. Kind of like I started to view it very Western. Um, Definitely by high school, that they didn't have these answers. That there was like fairy tales. That it was an evolution of mythology, like the pagan world. It was just kind of like an evolution of like the 12 gods or whatever. It wasn't going to give me any real insight. So no, to answer your question, no, I never really looked in the one place where I eventually found the answers to the questions I wanted answered that were never answered when I went down the road of the occult. Ultimately, when I kept digging, sorry if I'm going off on a tangent, but I think you can come to the truth like through the innocence of a child and kind of just go through like using your instincts, using like that inside answer. You can either just kind of accept it. Some people might even view that as ignorant and stupid, but I think sometimes those types of people, they just find it quicker. Or you could do it by just digging and digging and digging and digging and digging and digging and trying to find the answer to something. And if you just keep looking for the truth and you don't give up, you'll have to end up back there because it's the only place that answered. Orthodoxy answered all the questions I had from the beginning. It just took years of studying and curiosity to finally come back to that point to go, it was always the mysteries were answered. They were revealed there. Orthodoxy was never presented to me as a, how do I put this without sounding blasphemous? I don't know other words to use, but the mysteries were never revealed to me as mysteries. They were just curiosities, but the answer was never given to me because the Orthodox Church wasn't presented to me as a mystical place. because I was looking at it through a Protestant and Roman Catholic view. So I didn't realize that. I don't know if I'm making sense there.
It is. You're saying just because the culture that you're in, the greater culture was Catholic and Protestant, and some of that had seeped into the church. So the Greek people also felt or thought that way, you think? Had taken
Yeah, it's
on that
also my
Protestant.
yeah, it was there's that, and also my father's generation, like that generation, the baby boomer generation of the Greeks.
Hmm.
There's a lot of them that not all of them, but there's a lot of them that have this view, and forgive me if my dad's watching this or anyone of his generation, disagrees with me, and they should, like they could let me know, but they kind of viewed the church as like it killed Hellenism, it killed Greek isms, and what they mean by that is like the Platos and the Aristotles and the glory of ancient Greece. It kind of killed that paganism, so they view Orthodoxy or Christianity as it dismantled that original beauty. That's kind of how they view things, if that makes any sense. So like you'll even hear
It
a
does.
lot
I
of them.
hadn't heard that before.
It's very common amongst Greeks in particular, and I don't want to take shots at Greeks here because like that's why you have the Colivades fathers in the
Hmm.
1800s, kind of like reminding us of these things. And I think that generation became nationalistic and started viewing the world as like everyone's against us, which there's some truth to that. And they kind of viewed the church. That generation views the church as kind of killing something that was beautiful and great and high. A high status of civilization was killed by Christianity. They'll say like, oh, they shattered the idols. They went and they took down the
Hmm.
Acropolis and all this stuff, and they started to, and then they would take all the 12 gods of Olympus. There's like 12 disciples. Oh, they used the same number, right? Because they're just kind of reverted. So they start using this weird thing that Jordan Maxwell, a conspiracy guy, would love to do that thing. So there was a lot of that. um Sorry, I kind of veered off there. Did I kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, it is important to understand our ancestors and
Yeah.
all generations in the generation in which they live. We can't
Hmm.
expect them, the boomers, to be like us. We're in Gen X or the young people. Obviously, there's a reason why they are the way they are
Hmm.
as a generation. So I
Just
think
wanted to
it's
throw one thing in there,
yeah.
just as a defense, or how I kind of came back to Orthodoxy. The ancient Greek philosophers brought up a lot of good questions,
Hmm.
but they didn't have actual answers because the logos hadn't arrived yet. Like they hadn't they viewed the logos from a totally different perspective. I mean, I had these thoughts and opinions, and like I'd read about this kind of stuff before going to Florida for the amazing conference that I went to, but a lot of the conference was based on this subject, saying that like Plato, Socrates, through Plato and Aristotle, they were all trying to figure out this concept of the logos. They just didn't have the terminology to explain the logos as the truth is a who, not a what, which would be the logos for us is obviously Christ. Christ is the logos.
Hmm.
So they were describing this object from their point of view. Obviously, Christ is not an object, but you know what I mean. From
Yeah.
their point of view, they're describing these truths, asking these questions. What was the prime mover? Who moved the universe first? Where was this coming from? They just didn't have the example or understanding that it was Christ. And even Socrates describes the Logos as if he came as a person, and he describes the life of Christ, but he would be persecuted and all this stuff. So then when Christ came, if Plato was around at that time, I think he would have identified, or Socrates, he would have identified the Logos as Christ. It'd be like, this is the Logos. This is the prime mover. It can't be this ambiguous gelatin version of a creator. You know what I mean? That's kind of what
Yeah.
got me out of the occult. Like I didn't like that description of the all. It really troubled me that there was no identity to it. It troubled me so much that it annoyed me that it couldn't. Anyways, I'm sorry, I'm veering off into philosophy land, but this is kind of what brought me back.
No, it's all good. But I want to go back to what you were talking about with maybe the two paths. You said something like some people, have a question and they get a very simple answer and they're okay with it, and then other
Mhm.
people have to dig and dig and dig. I think with the way you said that was perfect. Where if you can learn to accept the answer, maybe you progress a little quicker. But I think God is so good that He gives each person a path. Like
Mhm.
you did have a path of needing to dig, and some people, for whatever reason, maybe need to go through that to come back and to have that kind of strong faith. But and there are saints, I think, probably on both sides of that really have to work through stuff, or like Saint Paisios when there's a boy who, you know this story. His brother's mad at him for reading the lives of the saints all the time, and the brother's friend says, "Well, I can make him stop." And so the brother's friend Costa comes over and tells him about the theory of evolution.
Yep.
Tells him, there's no God; it's all made up. And so he's very distraught at first, but then he says, "Well, but Christ was such a good person. Even if he wasn't God, I'm still going to dedicate my life to him, and I have all this love for him." And he actually ends up praying, I think, in the church for like 3 days, praying and fasting and weeping. And Christ actually comes to him and shows him, that I am the resurrection and the life. So, every path is blessed, right? As long as you get back to Christ, I think that's what's really important. So, um, forgive me, I lost my train of thought here. So when you came back, what was your impression of some of the things that you were seeing in the church? Did you have a different experience than when you were young? Did it surprise you?
Oh, you mean like when I re-experiencing orthodoxy? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, because you left
Okay.
what you said in about 99, right?
Yeah.
Maybe
I
I
mean, I
should
kept
preface this with, did you just kind of fall away, or did you still consider yourself Orthodox?
um if someone was to ask me my ethnic identity, I would include Orthodox into it. Like, so when someone would still like go at the church or talk about
Hmm.
Christianity from a Catholic or Protestant perspective, I would always remind them that you're forgetting the first 1,000 years. Like, I was saying that always, and my dad did teach me well that you don't learn about the Byzantine Empire, you don't learn about the Eastern Roman Empire in Western schools. And while everyone was in the Dark Ages, that was one side of Europe. The other side of Europe was flourishing. So I'd always
Hmm.
remind them of this historical fact, and like the Enlightenment, the Renaissance, and all that stuff. Like it or not, it wouldn't have happened without the Ottoman Turks invading Constantinople, and then all of the monks and such leaving the east and going to the
Hmm.
west, which gave birth
Right.
to the right. So that gets
Hmm.
glossed over. So I would bring that up. So I would identify as Orthodox from that perspective, but my beliefs, no, I viewed Christianity, like I said earlier, as like a childish explanation, like an evolution of paganism. That's kind of
Hmm.
how I viewed it. So yes and no. Like if someone
Yeah.
asked me if I was, so I would still go to church and I would still have some form of respect for the Orthodox Church, not for Catholicism and Protestantism, never. But I did have respect for the church on a subconscious level. And I would go kind of almost like, oh, isn't that cute? We're gonna go for. I always loved, my favorite day of the year. Always was Saturday night before Easter. Always, always, always. Even when I wasn't Orthodox, I always loved that. Like I loved going to church on Saturday night.
Mhm.
And, the Christos Anesti and all that. I
Yeah.
really loved that. And I'm just referring to how I would call it back then.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, when I came back, I approached the church, as I've said before, in a different way than I normally would have approached anything else, and I still continue to. Which is, I didn't try to study my way through it this time. I tried to experience the church. What I mean by that is I didn't do what I normally would have done, which is like read everything I could on the church history, the church fathers, all that stuff. I wanted to experience it rather than know it. I decided that I wanted to walk into it like a child, and just kind of feel my way through it. And it's kind of embarrassing. It still is. When I go to other churches that are not Greek churches and they're doing things that I should know what they're doing, I don't know what they're doing, and I'm asking like Germanus, like, oh, how do I greet a priest in a in the Slavonic way? Like, how do I do that? Like, how do I take communion properly here? Like, because I should know these things, but I kind of like the fact that I embarrass myself by asking these questions. I mean, it just happened when I went to Florida. Um, you know, some of the traditions are different and I should know them. And like, I don't know when to properly cross myself. I know how to properly cross myself, but I don't know when. And I kind of like, I'm okay looking like an idiot that way, if that makes any sense. So to answer your question, there have been moments when I've experienced something in church that I never did as a child. Um, it happened not too long ago when I was here back in Canada. I came out of a dark period, and learning how to submit and be obedient to my church father is a different thing for me. Sorry, not my spiritual father. Sorry, not church father, spiritual father. And there was a moment where I was kind of getting back on track, and I was in church at a church that I've been to a million times as a kid, and for some reason, I looked up at Elia, and I just started getting emotional for whatever reason. I had no idea why. I didn't want to show anyone that I was feeling emotional. Manny was sitting next to me, some other people were around, and I was like holding back. Like I didn't want to show that was, and it was like overwhelming. I had to like get up and go to the bathroom, and I was like, "Stop it! Like stop it!" Like I was pinching myself. I was like punching myself to like control myself. That's an experience I've never felt before.
Yeah, I don't know
It
if you
was
can stop
real.
those kind of tears, Mano. Those aren't emotional tears. Those are
No, you can't.
that's something else. you
It
know.
was. So that was different. I never experienced things like that. In Denton, I don't know if I should be telling these stories, but I mean, it feels right. Um, I'd taken communion for the first time in like a million years, because I was living in Mexico when I came back to the faith, so I didn't have access to a church. And I took communion in Denton at St. Maximus the Confessor. And I noticed some people, this is not a judgment, they want to show people that they feel emotional in these moments. I don't know, whatever their reasons are, and I'm absolutely not like that. And like I was trembling after, like I was just this thing happened. I don't know how much I want to get into it, but like I was like, what is this? This is weird. First time I met Father Turbo in person, and I'm going to go give my confession. First of all, it was like I'd known him my whole life. It was weird. And after having that experience, I'm like, this is real. Like I was just like, I think one of the first things I said to Father Turbo face to face is like, Father, this is real. It's like, this is real. So to answer your question, these are experiences I never had in the occult, and I had many experiences in the occult, many that I know. That's how I know Christ, like the good is real, because I know the dark side. Um, I hear Cyprian and Father Turbo talking about that a lot, and we've talked about that also, the three of us, and like the experiences are weird. So kind of like what St. Paisios was saying there, and I've heard others say it too. If this is a joke, if this is a con job, Christianity, Orthodoxy,
Mhm.
the end result is I'm definitely a better person. I definitely care about people different than I used to. If it's a con, I'll take the con. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? If it's a joke and I'm believing in something that's a lie, I'm a better person for it. So that in itself is enough for me. I don't feel that way, but I'm just,
Yeah.
so those experiences have been weird coming back. Looking at icons is different. The prayer rope, I now understand it differently. Um, you know, Having these conversations is different. I don't know. I don't know if I'm answering your question or if I'm
You
just
are.
being
You are. And I
vague.
think you nailed it in the beginning too when you talked about being humbled.
Hmm.
Because when you have to ask questions, you have to humble yourself some. Like that's where God can meet you if we're always so full of ourselves. Not saying you're full of yourself, but any of us
Yeah,
to the degree that we're full of ourselves, right? Like there's no room for Christ, but it's hard to admit that this maybe these people that just came to the faith, right? They weren't born in it. They weren't, they don't have ancestors going back 2,000 years in this. Maybe they know something I don't know. So I think that that kind of. Always helps us.
yeah.
So what have you seen in terms of um, the people who are now becoming Orthodox? Obviously, there's a huge wave of converts, right? And we've talked a lot, you and I personally, about Cradle and converts and the difference. And I think you're interesting to me because you have that Cradle formation in your younger years, but in a lot of ways, you're sort of a convert.
Mhm.
And I'm almost the opposite of you because I converted 30 years ago, and I'm around so many Cradle Orthodox that I feel like I've taken on a lot of their ways of thinking or ways of being. So I want to hear what your thoughts on are on the strengths of converts and Cradle?
I've talked about it a couple of times on my show. I think there's benefits on both sides. Um, Converts come in with such zeal and reverence. Like when I interviewed Father Paul, my spiritual grandfather, Father Tribble's spiritual father, um, he was talking about the way he grew up in his early Protestant days, and like the absolute adoration they had for Christ, even though they were kind of following it in the in the wrong path, but they did have this zeal. I see that with converts a lot, and it's impressive. And I think it brings some good to the table. Their ability to quote the Gospels is impressive. We don't learn that as converts a lot. Like I don't know a lot of converts that can do that like innately. I mean there are some, but like it's
Mm-hmm.
not. So they bring that to the table, and their desperate need to be on like to do things the right way, like very formulaic, is it's good and it's bad. That's something that we as cradles, I think we take it. So I'll talk about the cradle good. So like, okay, so the good is that with the product, the converts, most of them, the prots that
Mm-hmm.
I'm referring to. There's also the converts that come from the occult. There's a difference there, though.
Yeah.
And it's something that I've been asked to talk a lot about. It's something that I've talked about here and there. And personally, Justin Marler is pushing me to talk more about this. I'm kind of hesitant, but he's really pushing me hard on this, because a lot of the occult people. So I have to make a distinction between the
Mm-hmm.
convert that's like the occultist versus the Protestant. I'm leaving the atheists out for just for simplicity. There's a huge difference there. The occultist has a less problem with the mysteries. They kind of get it because they've experienced it, whatever way that they've experienced things. They don't have problems with icons. They don't have problems with prayer ropes. They don't have problems with incense. That's part and parcel with the occult world. Where they have trouble with is the spiritual warfare, because I think the occultists get attacked completely different than the convert that's Protestant
Mm-hmm.
that comes over. And there has to be a distinction there. I've never made this distinction as clear as I am now, because I think it's important, because a lot of people are coming to me with these questions that I'm like, in person, when I was in person, people recognized me. They wanted to talk about the occult. And I was like, oh, whoa. Also, because how I approach the occult is I didn't go into it for like the rituals of things, and I didn't care about the history of the occult. I actually cared about the practice of how to like focus my attention. I was interested in consciousness. Sorry if I'm veering off, but I think it's important to make
Yeah.
this distinction, because it fits well with orthodoxy. My interest in
Mm-hmm.
going to the occult was consciousness. It wasn't black magic. It is all black magic, but I didn't go into it for those reasons. So a lot of times I hear occultists talking about they went into it for the dark arts. That's a very different approach. Like I wanted to understand, why is it that I feel this energy between my hands right now? And I don't even know if I should be doing that as an Orthodox person, but I can do weird things. Anyway, so I focused on the occult from that aspect. So the positives that the converts bring to the table is the zeal, the interest in trying to understand things, but they bring in with them this manual aspect. They want to like approach it like, step one, you do this. Step two, you do this. Oh, you shouldn't say this. You should say this. Be careful when you swear, this and that. And they're very formulaic about it. And I think that's like a bad thing. And they want to call everybody out. Like, oh, you should do you didn't do your cross like this. You didn't do like, oh, the guy does it, and all this stuff. And I'm just like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's so not Cradle. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, Russian, Greek, Serb, and I grew up with all of them. We may joke around and argue about our versions of orthodoxy and culture, but at the end of the day, we know we're on the same team. Like, there's never that argument. I mean, yes, when it comes to like some of the weird things that are happening now with,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
well, we'll leave that out. That aside, even when we would tease each other, we knew we were on the same team. And when I would go to a Russian church back in the day with cradles, they wouldn't treat me like an outsider. They would kind of treat me like a cousin.
Yeah.
Like they'd be like, "Yo, okay, this is my cousin from Canada versus my cousin from Greece." Like they would treat me like that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, you're just not used to our way." Like that's how they treat us.
Yeah.
But the converts I'm seeing now from Protestantism, they're like, they have like a checklist of things, and they bring some of those Protestant things with them into the church, and I
Yeah.
find it weird. Like swearing is one. Like I've started to swear a little bit more openly now, and I'm more okay with it. because you know what? I don't care. Like I know a lot of how you swear matters, but I think it's more like a Protestant thing,
Yeah. Puritan.
Puritan thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
those are some of the negatives and the positives. And then with the with the cradles, I think we take for granted the beauty of the church, our traditions. Like I mean, ours, all of ours, not
Hmm.
the ethnics. I'm talking all of ours. I think that we are reminded of the beauty through the eyes of a convert. Where like, okay, I didn't really realize how beautiful our church is. The convert had to remind me of this. Um, so we didn't really learn how to properly practice or the whys we do things. Like it took me a while to realize, all these converts are saying glory to God, glory to God. Glory. I'm like, we don't do that, and then I'm like, wait a minute, we do. And I didn't realize like it's so programmed in our culture, we just say it automatically. Like, thank God we say that all the time as Greeks, even if you're not Orthodox. It's like built into the language. So some of the stuff is already baked into the cake. Like doxa to theo. It took me a minute to go, wait, that literally means glory to God. So we say that all the time. It just like we took it for granted. So I think those are some of the negative things. And sometimes cradles, especially before, they'd be like, "Who are you to come to my house and tell me how to do things?" Like there's like that aspect of cradles,
Hmm.
like you're not Greek, you're not Russian, you shouldn't be here. And I've seen this for both Russians and Greeks. So like I
Yeah.
know some Russians, they might say that doesn't like Russian converts to like Rokor. They'll say, "No, no, the Russians." I know lots of Russians have done that. Like I don't know where they're getting this from. Greeks do it, yes.
Hmm.
Serbs do it. We've all done it. Um, so I think that's a negative. The positive stuff is like we're more chill about the faith. Like sometimes that's a bad thing, but sometimes it's a good thing. We just kind of accept things as they are, just because it's baked in the cake. I don't know. Like I'm a little shocked by, like I was telling you before we went live. I've sat back for 3 years and just took notes and just listened and tried to be humbled and learn from converts, learn from younger people, which took a lot for me to do. I've talked to a lot of priests now, both in person and online. I've spoken to some people that I'm pretty sure are holy, um, and like I'm pretty sure of it. Two people in particular that I met recently, and now I'm ready to kind of talk about the notes I've taken. And I think I'm going to be a little bit more forward about it and be like, okay, now I do have something to provide here. And I always mention this guy's name, and forgive me, I'm not like fanboying him. He's my brother. Like he's a real good dude. And I gotta say, Buck Johnson, the way he goes about things, and like meeting him in person, versus how he is online, that's an Orthodox brother, man. Like he's for real. Like he doesn't have a checklist, and he'll break some of the things, but like at the heart of it, that dude's for real, man. Like for
Hmm.
real. And he brings like the cradle thing that I was trying to get at, like where it's just like it's like a realness. I don't know. Like I'm not saying the cradle is versus better than the Orthodox, like the convert. That's not what I'm saying. I think everyone brings something to the table, and if we kind of mix this up better, we'd have like a perfect organic Orthodox human being. I don't know if I answered your question well enough.
Yeah, you did. Forgive me, I asked you too big of a question. We should have started like with one or the other, but um no, I love that I love that you made the distinction with converts right now because that's really important. When I converted 30 years ago, it was all Protestant and Catholic converts coming in. They had a different set of questions, they had a different set of hangups. And now with so many either pagans or
Mhm.
atheists or whatever they're coming from, the occult, or just people who have literally never read the gospel,
Mhm.
do not know what's in the gospel. They have a different set of questions,
Yeah.
and I think honestly, I think it's thrown people in the church off a little bit, maybe because it's new.
Hmm.
But it's a wonderful opportunity. Imagine if you're hearing the gospel for the first time and you hear it correctly, you hear
Hmm.
the correct interpretation. It's actually a great blessing to some of these people. What's interesting to me in some of the maybe pitfalls that I see with converts is more about formation, which is why I asked you earlier about did you eat dinner together with your family? There's
Hmm.
so much baked into the cradle experience that I think people don't think about, which is did your dad
True.
read you bedtime stories? Did your family
True.
talk about things? Did you have dinner together? Right? You were kind of birthed in your youth in this place of stability and um, and love, and you had all of these family dynamics. Even if your family, I'm not talking about you, but even if someone's family had some things that maybe were wrong or whatever, the basics were there, right? And it wasn't just your family, but you had this whole community of families around you that were, I would assume, pretty much the same way.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I think what I try to tell people now is, like, I didn't grow up with that. My parents were together, but I don't remember having dinner together after 10 years old. I don't actually remember eating after that. Like, I think everybody was just trying to cope. It was just find something and eat in front of the TV situation. Um, and I think that that is actually the normative experience for most Americans now coming into the church. And I think we don't maybe recognize how much that impacts people. That they haven't had to like sit at a table and have dialogue with other people and listen and think about it, right? It
Yep.
makes some of the behaviors you see, some of the bad behaviors you see online, I think it makes them make more sense. If you realize, okay, this person
Mm.
came from a divorced home with, problems in the family, nobody ate together, nobody talked to them. They're kind of feral. So that's kind of been my take on this is the dynamic I see between convert and cradles that sometimes butt heads. It's there's a lack of there can be a lack of respect for the Cradle Orthodox community from the converts, and recognizing that there's a variety of little T traditions. Just the way Russians do things are different than the Greeks, and none of us make an issue about it, right? But if the convert is only in this one little jurisdiction and they don't have a broader sense of the church, right? That can be scandalous for them to see that Greeks cross themselves differently. But I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I never really thought about that. Although you have mentioned it to me before privately. Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I was trying to say earlier, that we're ethnically Orthodox, some of us, even if we're not practicing in the way we were raised. The dinner table is very liturgical.
Mm,
The respect we had for our fathers, my generation, it seems to have dissipated a bit, is the same kind of respect and reverence you'd have for a priest. uh, the mothers were viewed very much how we should view Panaya. Um, my generation, at least, of Greeks that I know, Greeks, Serbs, and Russians, because again, I grew up with a lot of them. We all had that in common. And I know that we call them, this is not an insult, guys, we call them cakers, non Greeks or non-Italians. It's an Italian slur against non-Italians. They would call them cakers because they manja cake, they eat cake for dinner. Like they would
oh,
say, like, traditionally, like they're not, like, they're not European, like they don't have those like
okay.
family values. So the way I'm using it now is like they don't have those values you're talking about, like meaning like they would not eat dinner together. They wouldn't eat home cooked meals. They didn't respect their parents. Like I remember seeing these non-Europeans, like, I'm just trying to simplify by saying non-Europeans, they would talk to their parents in a way I would never, or none of my cousins or none of my family members, Serbs, Russians, all of them, they would never
Mm,
talk to their parents like that. And I remember that shocked me. So there is some of that respect that you carry with you from the tradition of Orthodoxy to the dinner table, which I like that you keep bringing that up. And you're right, all my cousins and family friends around us all grew up in similar environments. And you you even saw it how we treated each other. So yeah, I never thought about that with some of the converts, or that American tradition you're referring to. They grew up in divorced homes, or
mm.
not having dinner together, not respecting their parents in the same way that we were taught to respect them. Although I'm seeing that with modern Greeks now, that they're kind of doing.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of dying out as a culture. Yeah, I think you make a really good point there. I never really considered that or thought about that. Uh, really.
To me, that's when somebody converts. I have a friend I'm thinking of in Texas, over in Dallas, and this family is like very stable, you know, but they converted a long time ago, and they're Americans, and I think that they had a pretty good intact family. And what I've noticed with them is they could more easily slide into,
Mm.
I'm going to get in so much trouble with Montushka Konstantina. Forgive me, Montushka, like living the spiritual life, okay? They could slide more easily into living a spiritual life, like a cradle Orthodox person does. And I think that's the reason why. And I say all this, to just, I think sometimes we're having conversations online and we're, talking about behaviors and stuff. And as a mom and someone who's like studied behaviors in children and how to maybe guide or prune behavior, I think it's always helpful to go back and think about, why is this person like this? Like
Mhm.
they didn't just wake up and decide, you didn't just wake up and decide to be how you were one day, right? You were formed in something. And I think one of the big things with feminism that we don't talk about, and all the women going back to work, is the loss of the richness of family life and the stability of family life, and how
Yes.
that actually creates like normal humans.
Yes.
I was listening to Metropolitan Athanasios of Limassol recently, and he was telling the story about how the old people used to be buried in their wedding clothes, and so they would have a dress, like the woman would have a dress for the second day, because
Yep.
weddings lasted many days.
Oh yeah.
And as she grew old, she would keep this dress and she would take it out every few years and make sure it still fit. And
Hmm.
he, at the end, he says, because she didn't want the people who were grieving for her to be bothered with, arranging all this. She wanted to take care of it herself. And he makes this statement, how human. And I feel like that's a big
Hmm.
part of what we've
Hmm.
lost, is not like, to be Orthodox is to be human. We use the term, this isn't Orthodox or this isn't Orthodox or it is. But I think sometimes maybe we should talk about, like, this is just human, like to eat dinner with your
Yes.
family together. It's
Yep.
just human,
Yep.
but it's also Orthodox. Does that make sense?
It does actually. You brought a lot of things up there that got me thinking. Because I don't want to make it a cradle versus orthodox, cradle versus convert thing. Because the positive that I'm seeing is coming back to Canada. So I am going to kind of like touch on what you just said, but I'm going to do it from a roundabout way. Spending 4 years in Mexico, then coming back to Canada and having not been here for 4 years, and then also traveling to the States a lot in the last year with Orthodox brothers and sisters in particular. I'm seeing that it's not a cradle convert thing; it's an Orthodox thing. And when maybe I'll just say Christian thing, but we know what I mean by that, just to simplify it. Um, because I'm starting to see that family life is dying really quickly here, really quickly. Even people that call themselves Orthodox here, there's something's going on here, and I don't want to keep attacking Canada because I know the Canadians really get upset with me. Like really, even ones that agree with my worldview and my spiritual view, there's just something strange going on here, and they've made it an American versus Canadian thing. And what they're not realizing that I'm really getting to is a traditional Christian thing versus a non-traditional Christian thing. That's really what I'm talking about when I look at Canada versus the U.S. And what I mean by that is, and this is like a shout out to all the converts that I've met. I, they've reached out to me from the online space, from Texas to North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida, invited me to come to their homes, literally took me in like family, like literally treated me like family. And I can name so many names, and I've mentioned them many times on my show. And I'm at a count of 6 people now, like 6 homes that have invited me. I've slept on their couches, on their floors, in there. They've paid for me to get there. And then I meet them in real life, and these are converts that had broken homes, like the ones you're
Mm-hmm.
describing, but they're acting like we used to act as cradles. To bring it back to, it's not even about the ethnicity, it's about the Christianity of it. They brought me to their tables. They treated me like family on multiple occasions, not once. Someone would say, "Oh, that's the honeymoon stage. Wait till you really get to know them." I'm like, "No, dude, I've gone to Germanus and Dave Sims a million times, and like they've treated me like home. I went to Daniel's house. He brought me in like a brother. We like clicked off the bat. There was no, you know, uh, Neil DeGray in Florida, and everyone I met there, and like they literally brought me into their homes and brought me to their dinner table and treated me like fam. So it's not even like Canada versus it's like these converts that I've met in the South. And again, it wouldn't be just that. I think it's all Orthodox people that really want to live that life. They're looking at the dinner table liturgically. They're looking at the relationships they have, brothers and sisters, liturgically, and they're something takes over in your soul, and it actually makes you behave honestly in this manner. And to bring it back to your the story of in I always forget his name. Can you say it again?
Athanasios.
Athanasios. He's actually some of my family members know him personally, so there's a family connection there.
Mm.
And he's representing the Cypriot culture my grandfather came from, that I remember some of. Their entire lives were living toward your death, and I remember hearing that even from the older people. When their spouse died, they wore black forever because
Mm-hmm.
they'll mourn forever. Just the same way as a monk and a priest wears black because they're mourning Christ. They view
Yeah.
that sacrament, that relationship with their husband and the wife, as part of the sacrament, and they live it by wearing black forever. So their preparation is for the day they die. So that older woman, making sure that she still fits in that wedding dress, she's preparing for her death, not in a more like not in like a dark way as like
Mm-hmm.
a Westerner would see it, but more of like their whole life is a preparation for death. So forgive me for going off on a tangent. It's something that I'd learned this year by being at church. That's one of the beauties of being back in Canada. I can go to church every Sunday. I realized when I messed up a couple times, and I said this to Father Turbo, so my whole week has to be preparation for taking communion. And if I have a hiccup, I can't take communion. Not that that's happened, but I'm saying so if I look at my whole week to stay clean, forgive me if I'm using the wrong terminology, to prepare for that Sunday so that I can take communion in an honest and earnest way. Therefore, my whole 6 days building up to that Sunday are in preparation for my death and birth. Like, and I think that's how the old people used to live, that I remember. They would live their life preparation for death and rebirth, even like taking it for the whole year and saying like you're preparing for Pascha, like your whole year. My grandfather's generation viewed their whole year as preparation for Pascha. Like that's how they live their lives. Like they live their lives for that one day. They're preparing for that day of death and rebirth, the like kind of like the spiritual spring, coming out of winter into spring.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how they viewed it. Sorry, I went off there, but
No, are you kidding? Excuse me. But
no
no,
problem.
I love it. I love everything you just said, Mano. That's beautiful. And I think the I've heard that the older people would say like preparing for what could be their last Pascha. Like every Pascha
Yes.
might be your last Pascha. This might be it. And after that, it might come the true Pascha, the eternal Pascha in your life.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I love everything you said. And this isn't about convert versus cradle in the sense of pitting one against the other, but I do hope that it helps people maybe to think about whichever one you are, to think about people on the other side and how different their experience is, right? But this is the beauty of the church, that it doesn't matter what your background is. Ultimately, as Matushka Konstantina likes to say, we're all living the spiritual life, and that's what's important, right? That's actually how we should be
Yep.
identifying ultimately. So, and the young people, going back to if they come from a broken background, I think I'm proof that that doesn't mean you can't find healing in that. Like that's what the church
Hmm.
is for.
Yep. Yep.
But I think that's, for me, that's been a great inspiration in seeing the Cradle Orthodox, is how stable they are and how much they're able to weather things. They don't get all upset when things happen. I mean, I know Greeks can get upset, but
Oh yeah.
but I'm saying, there's also a stability about them, right? That, when you've been through, your people's been through like Turkish occupation or whatever, right? I think that creates a stability in you as a people that, wait and see. God has all this. God is actually in control of everything. We don't have to maybe panic like I see, or be carried away with the trends that I see a lot of Americans struggle with.
I agree. I think we should stop seeing it though, in terms of Americans or no, I'm not saying that that's what you're saying. I'm just saying
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I've been telling myself recently is like the most of the mistakes I made in my life were because I was walking away from tradition, which includes the Orthodox faith. Like for Greeks, like traditionally that would have come like just like the dinner table you were talking about, preparing for
Hmm.
death. Even if someone is like Greek but they're not practicing, they still follow these things. And most of the mistakes in my life, which made me, you know, with my marriage, the way it went, my participation in it or lack thereof, or how it went, it was moving further and further away from tradition. And it was like almost like because I was part of this modernistic world. So maybe instead of like, the terms of like, westernized thinking, or like, American thinking, I'm starting to look at it as modernity versus tradition. And when I mean tradition, I mean obviously Christian Orthodox Christianity. Um, and rebelling against the tradition to be more modernistic is what led to a lot of the bad decisions I've made in my life, and how I lived my life, and why I didn't play my part properly as a husband or as a son or as a brother, to my sisters, or this and that. It was like that rebellious nature moving further and further away from tradition. And when I look at what that tradition really was, it wasn't the paganism, it wasn't the ethnicity stuff, it wasn't that, it was the orthodoxy of it, which is why I brought up those um, converts that I've met in the South, and the Canada versus the US thing, which I'm really looking at it as like I'm chasing Orthodox tradition. I'm not chasing, anti Canadian, whatever. Like I'm
Right.
anti modern.
Hmm.
So to the feminist point you're making and all that, I think that all kind of sums it up, for me. Now that I kind of look back at my life, at 48, and like where my mistakes are, and I still make horrible mistakes with raising my daughter. Um, but what mistakes I didn't make with her, to kind of bring it back to the beginning, is I never shut down any of her questions. Still don't. My the unwritten rule, I've even said it to her, is like, you can ask me whatever you want as long as you're okay to hear the answer. And I'm rather blunt, to the point where it's shocking to some people when I've answered her like stuff, like even if it's horrible stuff in my life, like, you know, I'll like just be honest and raw with her. Um, so I think that, we're in a dangerous place and time because of the modernity and how it's seeped its way in, and right down to like some Cradle Orthodox and converts I've seen, like they'll come into the church and they'll bring with them these covert modernistic, whatever the term is,
Modernistic.
idea,
Yeah.
modernistic, yes, thank
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
uh, ideas into it, and try to like change the church. And then they might even point out some changes that have happened in the church and kind of like say, oh, it's like this, but it's not. Like, what I mean is, like, if you went to the Byzantine style, originally the church was following that, and then
Hmm.
the church moved to the north, so it went more Slavonic. So there were some changes that were made. Those are not the same changes. Like, those are like slight changes. They're not really changing the essence of the faith.
Right. Yeah.
They'll be like, well, why can't we just? And they'll bring up like hot topics that I don't want to necessarily mention here, but that are clearly not part of the faith, and they'll try to like change these things about it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
especially now with the male female topic that's so hot, or like, the liberalism kind of creeping in, like, let's modernize the church and all that stuff. So I don't know if I'm going off too far here, but I think I'm trying to start to look at it that way: tradition versus modernity, and like, where's the cutoff line? Even with music, or when does an icon stop being an icon? When does like church music stop being church music?
You mean
Like, that's
when it's used in
troubling
like
me.
pop culture, like memes and stuff,
Yeah,
or
that, and like from I'm not an iconographer and I don't know much about it, but when does something, like, when do changes, like Father Turbo's icon here is an icon, but
hmm.
someone might say it's a little bit more like it varies differently from a traditional icon. This is still an icon, but at what point does it stop becoming? You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
stop becoming an icon. Obviously, I'm not saying that Father Turbo's
Right.
icon is
Right.
not an icon, but or like I've seen
There are
like,
different schools of icons, and fathers look like, I forget
right,
which one it is, if it's Cretan or I forget the other one, but there's one that's like the Serbian style, which his do look more
they
like
look
that.
different. And
Yeah.
I've seen some Russian ones which I had never been exposed to, and I was like, whoa, that doesn't look like, but that's, to me it does, but it's still an icon, right? And then I'm seeing a lot of like people taking like, church music. I'm not talking about like an Orthodox person making Orthodox music. I'm talking about like, they'll take like a, Christos Anesti, and then they'll try to like change it, and I'm like, at what point is it too far? Like I'm seeing a lot of it now,
Yeah.
right? And I'm just like, I don't know where's modernity and tradition? Where does it stop? How do we figure this out? And like, I'm not trying to be the one that's making the call, because I definitely it shouldn't be that person, but it's on my mind a lot, especially now when I'm hearing like modernized versions of like the Trisayon. I heard one the other day, and I was like, I don't know at what point this
Yeah.
stops. You know, like
I
is
do.
this
Yeah.
dangerous?
I think there's a lot online that I would say is for me, a hard no. And yeah, I understand you're not trying to make a rule, but these are things we should be talking about as Orthodox, like because the internet's new, right? Digital media or whatever is all new. So there aren't explicit church canons about this, but we should be trying to stay within the Orthodox mind on these things. And
Mhm.
I don't know if if the hard line it has been articulated or revealed by anybody yet. Not that I've heard of, but I have questions too. But I think the word traditional is difficult because it can mean so many different things, right? Like conservative or liberal. These things have so many different meanings. So I
Yeah.
really like the way John Hears talks about these things, which
Hmm.
is old
Hmm.
world versus new world. That
Yes.
to me makes so much more sense, especially when you're talking about men and women.
Yes.
Because even if you go back 200, 300 years, you're still going to be, I know this is a whole other topic, but if you're talking about modern day, even people who are anti feminist are still influenced by feminism by the very
Yes.
nature of being anti feminist.
Hmm.
Like anti feminist can
Hmm.
only occur within a feminist world, right? So I'm all for going farther back, 5, 6, 7, 800 years back, and what does the world look like for us then? Um, I think that's a more his framework. John Hears, I think is incredibly useful for that reason.
I agree. And having spent time with him both in South Carolina and then again in Florida, and then bonding with him in Florida more after having met him the first time. And we were just talking about, like he was telling me about some of the Georgian traditions, right down to
Mm-hmm.
like why they call it a supra, and it's like the tablecloth. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's like how it is in Cyprus. Like the old lady would come and tell you, I made this cloth we're all eating on, and she would like bore me with the story. Like I didn't appreciate it now, and I'm like, okay, great, you made the tablecloth. Now I think back to it, and she was kind of saying like, I was preparing for you to come over all
Mm-hmm.
these years ago when I made the tablecloth. Like I didn't think of it that way. And like that's the old world, right? Like I remember the old lady telling me, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't care. Like thinking like, as a kid, like I don't care. But like, you know, so the old world versus new world, he had a point there. He was talking about even like going around and when they do the cheers and like some of the not so orthodox conversation that happens around the table, but then it comes back to like a cheers of life and death and Christ and all that somehow, even if
Mm-hmm.
they're talking about something, and I remember that world. He has a really good point there. And I think you said it earlier about being human, like it being a human thing, that one thing that crosses all boundaries, whether we're Orthodox or not. At the end of the day, even the thing where I was talking about looking in the mirror, I think everyone's kind of can go to a mirror right now and look into a mirror, even if they're an atheist, and say, there's something's looking back at me. And it's not me. Like, this is the thing that makes us human.
Mm-hmm.
And old world versus new world, that's something that's a human thing. It's like it's something that connects us on a deep level that we often forget because we put ourselves in camps and tribes. And like even
Yeah.
the feminist versus
Mm-hmm.
anti-feminist thing, all of that. Um, it's really easy to forget these things, and it's really easy to make the focus on what we are, not the who we are. Which is, I always, whenever I get lost, I
Yeah.
always go back to the what and the who. And I think it's we're in a dangerous time, but we're in a beautiful time too, because a lot of people are having these thoughts now openly,
Mm-hmm.
and they've been pushed to such darkness they want it to end. And I think you're right with the tradition and old world versus new world, because we've changed these words. What does tradition mean? What does
Mm-hmm.
conservative mean? Is it a political thing, or are we conserving
Yeah.
tradition? So it gets convoluted really easy.
And what I love about orthodoxy in this context that we're talking about is Christ is the image of man. And
Mm.
he is what it means to be a human,
Yep.
And so this is intimately wrapped up with orthodoxy. But I think sometimes maybe when we say things are or are not orthodox, I think sometimes we're maybe missing something. And if we talk about being human, that is orthodox. To be
Yes.
truly orthodox, like the saints, they have fully embraced their humanity,
Hmm.
right, for who God made them to be. Um, and this is a universal experience for everyone, right? Whether you're inside or outside the church, you're human, right? God is calling you um, to be transfigured into His likeness, right? He is the image of humanity, what it means to be human. We don't have to go find that anywhere else. It's here in the church.
Yeah. I like that. I think I'm trying to understand that better recently. It's something that I was saying to you off air, and I've been talking a lot about with Manny. Forgive me for going off here, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot this week. Just because, like I said, I've taken notes for 3 years and was kind of quiet. Now I want to kind of speak up on some stuff from the way I speak, and I think we're always the modern version of online orthodoxy, or how it's become as a culture in the West here. Everyone's chasing the energy of it, not the essence of it. Like I was saying off air,
Mm-hmm.
like if you look at Saint John Maximovich or Saint Paisios, or any saint, like they're so different in how they approach things,
Mm-hmm.
their tactics, how soft or how hard they are, how strict they are, how much they bend. Some of them are very soft, some of them are not, this and that, but they're always chasing the essence of Christ, be like Christ. They're not chasing the energy. So what I'm trying to say is, it seems like a lot of the things I'm seeing now, is people are chasing the energy, meaning the look of something. Like, does it look, or like, does it, you know what I mean? Like, does it
I
feel,
do.
is it orthodox? Isn't it? But then the reality of the essence of it, like just being part of Christ, we're all going to come at it from a different position. We're going to all look different. We're going to smell different. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It's not pretty. Like I keep looking at this picture daily. Saint John is not pretty. I don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah.
You know, like this is not. And his approach to it was ugly. Um, and I mean that in a beautiful way, because I'm a Tom Waits fan, so I like that ugliness. So what I'm trying to get at is, like, they're all chasing the essence of the church. They're chasing the essence of Christ. They're chasing the essence of what it means to be like the likeness and image of Christ, rather than the way it looks, like in terms of like the outward look. Does it have this kind of writing? Does it look like death to the world? Does it have skulls on it? Does it sound like this? Does it, that kind of thing? And I'm not criticizing any of those things, because I love a lot of the things I mentioned. I'm just saying, if it doesn't have that original intention, whether it's even when we're talking about families or raising a child, like, why do you tell a child to think this way or do these things? Do you want them to just do what you want for the sake of you doing what you want, or do you
Mm-hmm.
want them to do these things to get closer to their creator, to prepare for that death, to respect their birth, and things that come after them, like the generation that comes after them? Are we laying the groundwork for a healthy generation after ours? Do we consider that? Do we even think about that? Like, I don't think we even think about that.
I think about that all the time. But that's the nature of what I do over here, is like, and sometimes I feel like there's a conversation, right, about nationalism and
Mm-hmm.
right now. And, you know, God bless everyone having that conversation. I'm just completely uninterested in the conversation because
Me
I
too.
feel like if you want to change the world, have dinner with your family every night. You can
Mm,
start today. That's how we're going to change the world, is by being who we're called to be human,
true.
to be orthodox, right? To be united to Christ. And this is a thing I've been thinking a lot about lately, are hierarchies.
Mm,
If we arrange the important things first, the higher things first, everything else below will trickle into place. So if you have you're with Christ, a whole bunch of other things snap into place like they should be. But if you take one of the lower things, even a good lower thing, and you put it above, I'll use my own world, homeschooling. If you put your identity and time and energy of being a homeschooler above Christ, well, it's an idol now. You took something good and
totally.
made it, the whole thing is now disordered.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea of correct ordering, maybe that's a better way of putting it, that or hierarchy, this just keeps coming back to me over and over. And we're taking some of the lower things, I feel like, and bumping them up too high.
Yep.
And this is, I think, where the conversations go off, because you start to criticize the lower thing, and it's not really because it's the you have a criticism, but because it's above the higher thing. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. I like the way you put that, and I think that if we remind ourselves of that, we will course adjust.
Yeah.
Wherever, if we are making a mistake, like let's say like a husband and wife situation, um, if the hierarchy is not proper there, like everyone has an issue with that subject sometimes. But if the goal isn't to be subservient to Christ first, then nothing else like the hierarchy is already
Mhm.
off. Like
Right.
it's
It
like
can't work.
it can't work. It can't work, right? So I mean and then sometimes one person loses faith over the other for a bit, the husband or the wife,
Hmm.
and how do you deal with that? Do you just continue going to church and hope that he comes to church with you or she comes to church with you? Um, but if your faith is there, it organizes itself, and like to politics and nationalism, I kind of view it in a similar way. Like
Hmm.
one thing I did learn, whether the people don't like it, this next statement or not, I don't really care. When I went to Texas and I saw they were talking Texas first, I understood it this time around, because I grew up in Canada where we hated guns, we hated like honestly, really the only identifying factor of a Canadian is that they're not American. Really, like let's be honest. Outside of like maple syrup, there's nothing Canadian. I'm sorry, Canadians, but really the only identifying factor that they have is that we're not American. That's it.
Matushka's going to be so upset with us with this interview. I'm not going to
I'm
tell her.
sorry. I apologize.
Sorry, Matushka.
I apologize. I apologize. Also, the Canada I remember is gone. I love the Canada that I grew up in. It's gone, and there was stuff to be proud of then. So I'm not. Let me just say that. But like I grew up thinking this like having this mentality against Texans or whatever, this and that, like this whole view. And when I went there and I saw this Texas first thing, what made me kind of go, oh, I get it. It's like Texas first, not because they're better than the rest of the U.S., but if you don't take care of your home base, you can't take care of anybody else. Kind of like that stupid argument that they give with the masks when put yours on first before you. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like what they're really saying is family first. So like, and if your family is not positioned first, meaning church first, family, you don't have that proper hierarchy, you're not going to take care of the nation. So if like the nation is made up of a lot of people living in one place, which is and all these people live in different communities, and these communities are like from towns, villages, and cities, and it makes up a nation. If the family that you live in, like your family, isn't healthy and proper, like mine currently I don't think is, but like let's say if it was, then I lived next to other people around me with healthy families, and that's what their focus was. And then we were going to a place like church where we all congregated together as a healthy unit, and then that grows into a town, and that grows into a city, and that grows into a nation. Then by saying family first, you're actually doing your part in terms of the nation.
Right.
It builds a healthy nation. But if it doesn't start with something that gives you unifying ethics, unified morals, unified beliefs, which all come together for us in church, then we're all going to have a different view on how we see politics and feminism and this and that and all that stuff. And then we're all going to be like, there's nothing that unifies us. Sorry, I went off there as I
No,
usually
no, I
do.
think you're right. I just, and I know you know this, but to clarify, I think uh, the top of the hierarchy is always the who, not the what. It is always Jesus Christ. Is always right. It's always the first thing in all of these, because there's no part of the world that the Lord doesn't touch. There's no part that He can't. We don't want to divorce Him from any of these individual subjects we're talking about, right? So He's at the top of the hierarchy, and everything aligning with Him is what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So this has been, and I think I got this from Father Turbo or Cyprian. It was someone. It kind of came to me over the last couple months as I was having other conversations. But this idea that think about the hierarchy of the thing, and don't put the lower things higher, has helped me in a lot of different conversations. And I think if we do this, a lot of the nonsense will just fall away because there's not room. You only have so much time for what you think about in your day, what you do. Put all the top things first, and you won't get in so much trouble. I won't get in so much trouble, you know.
Me too. Me too. I get in trouble a lot lately.
Same
Even
here.
the, even the, sorry to Matushko about the Canada thing when the Canadians get upset. That's
You
gonna
know,
get me in trouble for sure.
I've never had so many. I don't think I've ever had any Canadian friends, and now I have several. So it's pretty funny because I'm learning all about Canada. But anyway, it's been great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you want to give a shout out for everything you do?
Sure. You could follow us anywhere like Instagram, YouTube, whatever. The study of stuff. But we're trying to move closer to our school platform and really build that up and kind of add different kind of content. Say some stuff that I don't normally say publicly. I have my reasons for it. But yeah, so I don't know. Study of stuff wherever. Go to our school.
Are you having your
Boardnomore.net. You can find everything. Sorry.
Where's the weekly live show, or what? Do you have a day right now? Are you still working on that, or?
No, we decided on Monday, so we're gonna do it tonight. We're filming this on a Monday, so SOS
Oh,
Radio
great.
will be Monday nights from now on YouTube, and in the school group we drop a Monday morning SOS that's a little bit different. So those
Okay,
are
so
the
tell
regulars.
tell people what SOS is, because most of my audience is probably not
Oh,
familiar with it.
yeah, yeah. SOS Radio is we've been doing it for about a year and a half, almost 2 years now. It's just like an old school style radio show kind of thing. It's like having an old school style DJ that kind of talks and plays some music that they're into. We are Orthodox, obviously, so there we play a lot of Orthodox artists, and we just have a good time, kind of chill, listen to some music, and chat in the chats. That's kind of it.
It's it's a great chat. That's where I found you, was showing up. I was trying to figure out online orthodoxy. Went over, and just phenomenal people in your chats. Love all of them. It's really great. I It's often when I'm making dinner, so I don't often get to finish, but it's always a joy to see everybody over there, and totally unique. You're not going to find something else like it online. Um,
Appreciate it.
yeah. So thanks for being here, Mano.
Thanks for having me. It's been great. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Okay, just hang out for a bit, and we'll say goodbye to everybody. So take care, everyone.